Hello, my name is Andrew Tinkham. I'm with the state of Ohio, the Office of the Ohio Consumers Council. The Ohio Consumers Council is a state office that protects residential utility consumers who have regulated natural gas, electric, telephone, and water. We have a lot of great resources and services available to Ohioans, which include our website, which is www.occ.ohio.gov. We have fact sheets on numerous utility topics, which include information on energy efficiency, energy choice, how to understand reading your bills, your utility bills. Also, we have information on consumer protections, which we'll talk about here in a few minutes, and also on consumer assistance programs that can help pay towards the utility bill. If you ever have a question, you are more than welcome to give our office a call. Our phone number is toll free at 1-877-742-5622. Once again, feel free to give us a call. Our office is open 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, but you're more than welcome to leave a message outside of those hours, and we will return the call the next business day. And also, we're on social media, so feel free to go out. We're on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is OCC4Consumers, and we post once or twice a day on educational information and current utility topics. But today, I'm going to discuss utility consumer protections. You may not think of utilities and consumer protections going together, but there are a lot of things out there that it's important for consumers to know to protect themselves and to save money so that they don't get tied up into some of these scams that are occurring. You know, with more Ohioans home during the COVID-19, the potential to be scammed has unfortunately increased. Consumers, will be home to answer calls or answer the door instead of being out like we normally would be. During the program, like I said, we will learn how to protect yourself from utility scams. Over the years, unfortunately, we've come to expect unwanted telephone calls. As I know, they're annoying to receive, and unfortunately, I receive them just like everyone else throughout the state of Ohio. Many Ohioans rely on their caller ID to let them know who is calling or whether to answer the phone. However, scammers are now using technology to hide their identity to get you to answer the phone. When the scammer places the call, the name and phone number appear on the caller ID as if it's coming from a trusted source. And these trusted sources can include government agencies, banks, and even your utilities. And like I said, I'm hearing a lot of consumers who are getting calls from Social Security when in fact it's not truly the Social Security Department calling consumers. Now, if you answer the call, the scammer may try to obtain your personal information or your credit card number. Unfortunately, these type of calls are not going away anytime soon. One way to protect yourself is consider not answering calls from phone numbers you do not recognize, especially if you have voicemail or an answering machine. At that point, you can just let those calls go to your voicemail, and if it's a call that is legitimate and you need to return at that time, you can make that decision. If you do not have caller ID and are ever suspicious about a call, hang up immediately. Certainly don't hang on the line if you don't think it's a legitimate call, because unfortunately they're going to probably try to obtain personal information. The next scam I wanted to talk about, which caller ID spoofing kind of leads into, is the emergency payment scam. The emergency payment scam is when a scammer calls a consumer and the caller ID makes it appear as coming from your local utility company. So in the Marietta area, it may appear it's coming from AEP or Dominion East Ohio Gas, but in reality, it's not coming from one of these companies. It's actually coming from a scammer that may not even be in the United States. So it's very important that when these calls come through, to be very careful, because once again, when they come through our caller ID, they look legitimate. So in this case, the call comes in and it looks like it's coming from a local utility. So a customer might answer the phone because the caller ID looks legitimate. So once they have you on the phone, the scammer pretends to be with the utility company and request payment immediately. Most times they'll even threaten to disconnect service in a short amount of time, within 30 to 60 minutes. If you receive one of these calls, we highly recommend you hang up the phone, because unfortunately what they're going to want you to do is make a quick payment. Because once they have you on the phone, what they instruct you to do is to go to the grocery store, a convenience store, or a gas station, and they ask you to purchase a prepaid credit card or debit card or a retail card. And usually the amounts can be in the hundreds of dollars, maybe even up to $500. So they want you to go to the store, get those cards, and then when you return home, they say they'll call you back to obtain the numbers on the back of the card to satisfy the payment and to keep your services connected. And unfortunately, we've heard of this happening throughout Ohio, where consumers have purchased these cards thinking that they had a disconnection notice. In reality, they did not. And once that money is given to scammers, it's almost impossible to get the money back. So we certainly want consumers to be very careful if they get calls, especially if it states it's from the utility threatening disconnection. Once again, if you get one of these calls, the first thing you should do is hang up and not act on their request. The second thing that you should do is call the utility company that they're pretending to be. At that point, what you should do is not call the number on the caller ID. You should get the phone number that's listed on your most current bill and call the utility company directly. At that point, you can report that you received this scam, and also it can give a consumer relief to know that their service is not going to be disconnected after talking to the utility company. So once again, be very careful with these type of scams. Once again, when they come in and they look like it's coming from a company that's legitimate, at that point, a lot of consumers out there think that whatever appears on the caller ID is 100% accurate. And unfortunately, in this day and age, that's not always the case. I would always warn consumers to be very careful when these type of calls come in, even when they look legitimate. And if you do answer the phone, just make sure that you, at that point, still err on the side of caution. Because once again, a lot of places like utilities, government entities, they do not call consumers before sending out something through the mail, whether it be a disconnection notice, or in the case of government entities, they usually send something in the mail if something needs to be done, whether it be like through a Social Security or the IRS. Another scam I wanted to discuss is slamming. Slamming occurs when a electric supplier, a natural gas supplier, or a telephone service is switched without your permission. Unfortunately, a lot of this occurs through a telemarketing call, or it can occur through a door-to-door sales interaction. The most important thing to know is if you would have a telemarketing interaction with a salesperson or a door-to-door salesperson, you do not want to provide them your primary electric or natural gas or telephone account number. That's very important not to provide. A lot of times a door-to-door salesman who's trying to get you to switch your electric or natural gas supplier may request that information. Another thing that you don't want to do is provide them your bill. Sometimes they'll ask to see your bill to see if they can save you money. The one thing that you don't want to do is give them that bill, because as we mentioned, we were talking about not giving out the account number. The account number is listed on your bill. And a lot of consumers might think, well, what's the worst thing that can happen if they would get a hold of my utility account number? It's not like my Social Security number or banking account information. For energy suppliers, for electric and natural gas suppliers, all the information they need to switch your service without your authorization is the account number on your utility bill. So that's why it's important to protect that information. So just make sure that when they do come to your door, don't give them that information. If you do feel that you possibly have been slammed, it's important to report that to the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio. Their phone number is 1-800-686-7826. There are some ways to avoid slamming. Uh, One thing that you want to do is know who your current energy supplier and your telephone carrier. So that's very important to know, because the next step I'm going to tell you to do in order to avoid being slammed is keep an eye on your utility bills. What makes it challenging to know if your electric or natural gas supplier was switched without your authorization is if it was switched, you will not receive a separate bill from these companies. They bill on your primary electric or natural gas bill. So for AEP and Dominion East Ohio Gas, those suppliers will actually bill on their bills. You wouldn't receive a separate bill. So it's important to review your bill each month to make sure that the company that's supposed to be supplying your service is the one listed on the bill. Now, if you do notice that there is a different company listed than you signed up for, or if you're continuing to receive your service through the primary electric or natural gas company, but you notice it's a different company listed on your bill, at that point, it's important to report that to your local utility company and also report it to the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio. Once again, their phone number is 1-800-686-7826. And they can try, at that point, they can help get this issue resolved. So once again, be careful with slamming issues. And once again, the one way to really protect yourself is not provide any salesperson, whether it be a telephone or a door-to-door salesman, do not provide them your utility account numbers. The only time you want to do that is if you definitely know you want to switch your service. But even then, we would recommend that consumers obviously look at other rates and even comparing it against the standard offer, which is usually the cheapest option for consumers. Now, cramming, which sounds very similar to slamming, is another issue that we see come up. And what cramming is when a utility company adds products and services to your line or to your account without your authorization. Unfortunately, we see that often, in particular with telephone bills, but it can also occur on the natural gas and electric bills. We mentioned with the energy marketers and how AEP and Dominion will act as a third-party biller for those companies. These companies can also act as a third-party billing provider for other products and services. So that's where you need to be careful. Like I said, cramming is in what can be tough with these charges on your bill is they can be hard to recognize. Once again, they don't really explain even what you're paying for. It may say membership fee or monthly fee or insurance. And what makes it bad is a lot of times these fees occur on a monthly basis. They reoccur each month. And so if you don't identify them and challenge them, they're going to reoccur each month. And a lot of times they're not expensive in price, so they can be hard to recognize. It might be $3 to $5 a month. And, if you're only looking at what you need to pay each month on your bill and you see a $2 or $3 increase, it might be something you do not challenge because you just think something went up as part of your bill. But in reality, you may be paying for a service you never requested. So once again, highly recommend consumers to read through their energy bills each month. I know there's a lot of charges on there that can be hard to understand, but it's important to read through that to make sure you're not being billed by a company or for a service you never requested. I would always rather see a consumer challenge a charge on their bill than pay for something they never requested. And so once again, look through that. Some ways to protect yourself from cramming is be very careful who you provide your phone number to. Especially, I know it's a little different in this day and age. There's not as many festivals or fairs going on, but You want to be careful when you're signing up for things at fairs and festivals, or even if you're online filling out for coupons and maybe for recipes, and they might want your telephone number. Be cautious with that. Certainly, if that's something you still want to proceed with, read through the terms and conditions, because that's certainly some ways that we've seen where consumers have signed up, kind of been tricked into signing up for a service they didn't really want, and that ends up appearing on their utility bills. The next thing I wanted to mention is the do not call list. Certainly the do not call list, unfortunately it doesn't block all calls coming through to our home, but the do not call list is still available, and it is still a way to prevent legitimate telemarketers from calling you and marketing services. In order to do that, you have to register through the federal government, and their phone number is can we pause there? Lost the number. You can get the toll-free number at 1-888-382-1222 or through www.donotcall.gov. So it's easy to register. It is free. It can take up to a month before your number is actually on the do not call registry. Now, where it can get a little confusing, we're getting a lot of scam calls that appear to be true telemarketing calls. And unfortunately, we found that scammers are not going to abide by a do not call list. And so you're still going to unfortunately receive calls when you sign up, but it might reduce the number of calls that you receive from telemarketers. There are some restrictions with the do not call list also. Just to let you know, we're kind of getting into an election year, and political campaigns can still call consumers who are on the do not call list. We do have information on the do not call list on our website, and I highly suggest going out there and reviewing it. It's once again, our website's www.occ.ohio.gov. And certainly there are ways to register complaints if you feel that you received a call and from a telemarketer. And so if you receive one of those calls, you can file a complaint at the Ohio Attorney General's office. And the Ohio Attorney General's office is 1-800-282-0515. And you can also file a complaint at the Federal Trade Commission at 1-888-382-1222. And these agencies do have the ability to look into these type of complaints, and if they get enough of them, sometimes they will go after these companies. And unfortunately, there have been legitimate companies who call consumers who are on the do not call list when they should not be calling them. The last scam that I wanted to talk about is the yes scam. The yes scam is when a person or an automated message calls a resident and asks them a question to get them to respond by saying yes. And just for an example, you may pick up the phone and the voice on the other end may ask, "Can you hear me?" And when you respond by saying yes, they record that. And obviously when you say that, that would be a natural response. And who wouldn't say that if someone asks, "Can you hear me?" You don't think you're really answering to anything that would cause you to sign up for a service or purchase a product. But unfortunately, what they do at this point is they record you saying yes, and then they make it sound like you're saying yes to a service or to a product. And at that time, then you end up either getting billed for a service that you never requested, or you end up receiving a product that you never wanted. So I always caution consumers when they pick up the phone to always think about what you answer yes to. Really don't ever use that term when you're talking to a telemarketer or a salesperson. Because at that point, in this day and age, they can record that yes and make it sound like you're signing up for service. So be very careful with that scam. Hopefully some of the things that we spoke about today is something that can help you identify some of the scams that are currently happening in Ohio and unfortunately throughout the United States. It's, once again, it's always important to keep your guard up. A lot of these type of scams can sound very legitimate. The people, the scammers on the other end of the phone can, sound like they are really with, a government organization or with a utility company, and when in reality they're not. The best thing to do is protect yourself. Once again, if you don't recognize the caller ID, don't pick up the phone. Just let it go to voicemail or to an answer machine. And at that point, then you can decide whether you want to call the number back. A lot of times scammers won't even leave a message at that point. They just want to get on, unfortunately, to call someone else to try to scam them. So once again, be very careful. I appreciate the time. And please, I guess my last thing I want to share is if you could share this information with anyone else I highly recommend it, because the more people that know about these scams, the less the scammers are successful in getting money out of Ohioans.